Is Auburn's biggest strength also its biggest weakness?
In the world full of podcasts, he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of hot takes, an Auburn sports homer, master of the boog, and message board legend. Get your buttons buttoned and your hats flattened because the Top Button Podcast is about to kick off. And you don't want to miss your courtside seat. Now, here's your host, Charlie Five.
Yes, sir. We're back. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast live edition. This Sunday night deal, guys, is just absolute banger. And we have two studs that are usually here every week as well. Zach Blackerby, Daryl Dapprich, and we're ready to talk some Auburn basketball. First off, Zach, you said it to me this morning at church. You've predicted it this week. What is it about us that we're sort of like we're waiting for the shoe to drop as far as Auburn losing? Zach, you said I really thought this was the game that this was going to be our first loss. Dap, I think you predicted it on Zach's show. What is it about maybe Auburn fandom in general that we're just kind of waiting for it's like we're waiting for the rug to be pulled out from under us?
Dap, are people letting you know and reminding you that you picked Auburn to lose? Are people calling you out at all about that?
Yeah, you should look at the chat. Look at the chat from yesterday's game. So but I'll wear it. I mean, I owned it. I did, and so yeah, I'm not going to back down from it. They deserve to come at me for that.
Now, is it a pressure thing? Is it we know we're not going to go undefeated in the SEC? Like, I think it's a lot of that. And it's like when you look at what's left on the schedule and you got to think, okay, which are the games that Auburn's most likely to lose? A lot of the projections say Auburn's going to lose 2 or 3 games, depending on where you look. It's like, okay, like at Tuscaloosa is probably the easiest one to point to. It's like, if you think Auburn's going to lose twice, you got to think, okay, maybe at Rupp is the second most likely. And then I think the game that we just won by 10 points was probably the third most likely, when you kind of like, okay, if Auburn's going to lose 3, it's probably these 3. And to me, like, I don't know if Auburn gets to 3 losses at this point.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you said that you can't go undefeated. Surely we can't, right? Like you can't win them all. Like there's got to be a loss in there somewhere, you would think, just by the sheer how deep the SEC is and how tough this schedule actually is. Like, surely there's got to be a loss. So I don't know, maybe like we're trying to like soften the blow, but regardless, this team does not stop. Team doesn't stop winning. No. They keep winning. And honestly, I know the game got tight at times Saturday, but I never really felt like the game was really in question. I don't know. It felt like every single time they leveled a charge, we answered. And just continued to hit shots. Multiple people hit shots. And then you hit, I think it was 9 in a row, free throws there at the end to ice it. It's just, man, they're just – I know we think a loss is coming, but this team might not lose.
Well, I think a couple things. Number one, it's not an indictment. People need to quit thinking it's an indictment against Auburn that we picked them to lose. It's a 35-game basketball season.
Yes.
Against the toughest conference in America, with the team that had shown the last 2 weeks that maybe they weren't playing their best basketball, but still found a way to win, right? I mean, it's not like the signs weren't there. Auburn wasn't blowing people out. They beat Mississippi State. That was the only blowout they had. They beat LSU on the road, a very bad basketball. So it's not like the signs aren't there, and it's not an indictment against Auburn. It's basketball is different. If you know the game, if you follow the game for a long time, even a 3-loss season in this conference is phenomenal. So it's coming. Bruce Pearl himself said, it's coming. Yeah. We are going to lose. So I'm just following what he says, what the Jedi Master said.
Well, I mean, let's look at what's happening throughout the SEC. I mean, it seems like everybody's been blown out at some point, with the exception of really Auburn and Alabama. And Alabama dropped a few games in non-conference where it's like, oh, okay, like what's this team going to look like? But I mean, even when you look at this past weekend, I mean, Iowa State has dropped 2 games in a row or 2 games recently. I don't know if they're in a row or not. It looks like they are with their
in a row.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. And then like Arkansas goes into Rupp and takes care of business. I know there was some emotional action in there and some major storylines with Cal going back to Rupp, but you saw Oklahoma, which is probably a bottom 3 team in the SEC at this point. Like, I don't think they're that good. They beat a Vanderbilt team that slipped into the top 25 because they just whooped up, 2 top 10 teams, last week. So the level of parity in this conference, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And so for you to predict Auburn to slip up somewhere, like that's what's happening. That's what's happening throughout all of college basketball, with the exception of 2 teams, and Auburn is one of them.
I think multiple, when I say multiple, I'm talking like way more than just 2 top 25 teams lost this past weekend. Houston's another one that dropped a home game to Texas Tech.
What was that stat again? What did you say?
I don't remember. What do you mean? I said multiple top 25 teams dropped games.
I thought you said a number out of 25. My bad.
No, I can't remember exactly the number. It was a significant number of top 25 teams dropped games this weekend, and I included Houston in that conversation, who dropped a home game at Texas Tech in overtime. It's just all these good teams are losing games. And
Kansas lost to Baylor, who was unranked.
That's right.
Blew a 21-point lead.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? Do you mind? Is the Auburn and Alabama basketball rivalry right now the best rivalry in college basketball?
I guess it would depend on what makes a rivalry game great. What makes a rivalry great? I would say that right now there is no better rivalry that's 2 better teams in college basketball by far. Yeah,
I mean, my whole life it's been Duke and North Carolina, but like growing up, it always seemed like it was 1 versus 6 or 2 versus 5, and the game always meant so much. And North Carolina's like really fallen off. And I just think with like what's at stake this year and how emotionally charged these fan bases are right now, and both these coaches making it to the Final Four somewhat recently, like I don't know if I'd put another rivalry ahead of ours right now.
I wouldn't.
I don't think you can justify it if you do. I mean, like this, the Iron Bowl of basketball is going to be a steel cage match. I mean, it legitimately, both of them. It's going to be a 2-round steel cage match. I want to throw something out there because it's a narrative that I feel like maybe we can discuss. Maybe it's more serious. Maybe it's not very serious. But there's something about Auburn that I think gives them the edge in all these games, but I also wonder if it hurts them at times. And I'm wondering when and if it'll ever show its face. And this is a clip I'm going to play, and then I'll discuss. This kind of scratches the surface on where I'm going, and then I'll throw it to you guys and see what you think. But here's what Dylan had to say after the game.
VP recruited some killers, man. We got some guys that ain't right in the head. Tahad and CB, they love a hostile environment, and I've never seen a group of guys embrace this. Like, it seems that sometimes we'd rather put on the road. It's just more enticing. We love our fans. We love having witnesses in the stadium. But I mean, like, sometimes on the road, these guys just get going. Like Miles Kelly, like he hits big threes. Denver Jones gets going. Everybody just gets going on the road. And it's just like, this is the first team I've really been on in my whole life where it's like these guys embrace the toughness. And that was kind of our MO heading into the season, just embrace the schedule that we have in front of us.
Toughness, intensity, a little bit on edge at times. I think it gives Auburn the edge in a lot of these games, but from a officiating standpoint, sometimes I wonder if it hurts Auburn, and I can point to a statistic to kind of make my point. In conference play, the foul disparity is on average per game 5 fouls per game between Auburn. Auburn's going to have 5 more fouls called and shoot 2 to 3 less free throws per game. And you got to think about this in context. Auburn's been ahead in a lot of these games. Okay. So teams have to foul them late to get free throws. So that should give them more free throws. That should give other teams more fouls. So Auburn's already so far ahead of them in fouls in the game that when they have to foul late, it still comes out to a 5 foul on average discrepancy per game. I'm just wondering sometimes, and I worry about in a close game, will Auburn be able to get the call they need? I think about the game, the Ole Miss game. There was a point in the game where one of their players late in the game caught a ball down low. And this is when Broom lost his mind. caught a ball down low. He put his head down and his shoulder and drove it into Janai Broome. And then we were called for the foul. It was a clear offensive foul. Broome lost his mind. They were bragging on how the refs didn't call technicals. Am I overthinking here? I don't know if I want Auburn to change, but the strength, I wonder if it could possibly become a weakness in crunch time.
Well, first of all, I don't think you're wrong. I think there's a certain type of player that Bruce Pearl recruits it's a double-edged sword that you live and die with. It's an emotional, edgy, hard-nosed kid that doesn't blink, okay? And the ones that don't do that somehow find their way out the door and go other places. It is its greatest strength, but it also could be its biggest weakness. For 3 years, this is the third year I've been doing a post-game show with Zach. And 2 years ago, I remember saying specifically, Auburn doesn't get calls because they whine and complain too much. I mean, I said it. Broome, all those guys. So I will say this. That doesn't necessarily, though, explain why Walker Kessler didn't get calls. Remember, he got killed. He got absolutely murdered, and people would go, why does he not get a call? So there's got to be a little something deeper than that. But I will say this. I know this isn't conspiracy theory. This is just, and if anybody thinks this is wrong, they're naive. I know for a fact that, and coaches have told me this, that get buddy with officials that retire, that officials hate players that whine and complain and talk during games so much that they put them on a report. They know who these players are before they play that game. And I've seen a referee tell a player, if you don't shut up, you're not going to get a call the rest of the night. I saw it with my own eyes. An official that's a big time official calling a smaller type basketball game, say that to a player. And so if you don't,
are his initials PA by chance?
No, its initials are TV.
No,
got it.
Pat Adams he's not gonna tell anybody, because then that may spoil his TV time. So it's gonna be spontaneous.
Sarah, what would you do if Pat Adams asked you, like,
he's a silent assassin,
to lunch one day? What would you do?
I would keep an eye on my food to make sure there wasn't anything sprinkled.
But you would accept. You would go to lunch with Pat Adams?
Wow, I think I would. I think I have to be the bigger person. And I'd like to ask him. I'd like to pick his brain. But if he did ask me to lunch, I'm sure he would have media show up to tape it.
Sure.
Or to film it, because they want. And he
live stream it.
He would want to be seen. But so let's not underestimate that there's a human factor there. We're all human beings, and if somebody gets in your ear and comes across whiny and complaining and showing you up, that makes an impact, and that reputation's hard to undo.
Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know. It's like my least favorite thing in the world to talk about, like officiating in college basketball. The thing is, though, is it's not just bad for Auburn, and it's not just bad in the SEC. It is a problem throughout all of college basketball. And like the NBA analysts that I talk to, like, they complain about it all the time too. Like basketball has an officiating problem when it comes to, the flow of the game and, the inconsistencies and the changing from half to half. I don't know what the fix is. I don't think it's as simple as, Janai Broome and Chad Baker Mazzara talk too much. Like, I don't think it's just that. Is that a factor? Like Darryl saying, sure, it probably is. But I think it's a much larger issue, and I don't think it's just Auburn that is dealing with this.
Well, look at what happened. Let's just be honest. If anybody has gotten hosed worse in the last year in college basketball than Texas Tech Saturday, I've not seen it with JT Toppin and how their coach lost their mind. He got ejected. Yeah. So it's not, officials that do Big 12 games, they complain. ACC, that Kentucky-Arkansas game was officiated very well. Don Daly's crew did a good job. I would beg to get officiating like that. They let them play. The fouls were reasonable at the end of the night as far as total amount of fouls, because we're not just talking about disparity fouls here, Kyle. We're talking about total fouls that make the games last 2.5 hours long.
Sure. Now I want to make sure that I'm clear here. I'm not complaining that we're being picked on. So I want to make sure that's clear. What I'm questioning is the style of play. Does the style of play that we in our attitude and in how we attack the game, does that, that's what's leading to these wins? But I'm also wondering, does it also sort of, like Dap said, does it kind of put us on lists to where you don't think so?
Or it may put us on lists, but I don't think it matters. We have 20 wins and it's February 2nd.
I agree. I'm not
But
saying.
at some point, I get it, Zach. We have 20 wins, but it just takes one time for it to matter and cost Auburn a basketball game, and we'll have a completely different. And it can happen. One time, one call where an official the Yale game last year. You tell me that if Chad Baker-Mazar, did he deserve to get ejected? Probably. If he doesn't get ejected, do they win that game?
That's not a style of play thing. That's not a style of play thing. That's Chad losing his cool and doing something extremely selfish that he apparently is owned up to. That's not a style of play thing.
But we didn't just say style of play. We said style. We said style of player, style type of athlete that Bruce Pearl recruits that's emotional and edgy and sometimes doesn't blink, but that also can cost you, and it did against Yale.
Yeah, I don't want to. I think it's something you just have to live with, though, with this team. I think the makeup of this team, it's just something that you can't.
And this isn't a this year thing. Like, this is a culture that Bruce Pearl has built.
Amen.
Where it is player first. It's player focused. You're going to get better over your time here, and you're going to have the chance to win for a championship. And it's going to be a family vibe. And it's going to be electric when you play at home. And you get to play on the best road environments in college basketball. And we get to be a part of this if you come here. And it's going to be a player first thing. Yeah, I mean, this has been Auburn for the last few years.
Can I throw out a hypothetical? I want both of y'all to answer.
Yep.
Do you think that the style of defense and the intensity in which Auburn guards you could somehow be attributed to Auburn always having more fouls than the opponent, because Auburn just by default absolutely gets in your shorts when they guard you?
Well, without a doubt, Auburn is going to, just by the nature of what you just said, is going to end up having more fouls called on them because they're just all up in your grill for 40 minutes. That's not, I guess. Yes, I agree that would probably lend to more fouls for sure. I guess it's less about that than it is less about style of play, I guess, more so, and then like the intensity, talking, letting you know about it, which makes this team so good because they're so intimidating. But I'm wondering sometimes also if it's one of those things you just have to live with, because it's gonna affect us at some point in time. I'm siding with Dap here. It is gonna affect us at some point in time, but it's like, can you change the makeup of this team? Can you change their personality? Like, how badly would that affect their play on the court? I say you just got to roll with it. You just got to accept it. It's kind of like I said on the reaction show. It's kind of like with Dylan. Like Dylan, you just have to accept the fact that Dylan's going to make 3 or 4 plays in a game that's going to make you want to break furniture. But then he's also going to make 3 or 4 plays that are going to completely alter the momentum of the game. And again, I think of last night when he had the offensive rebound, kicked it out to Chad. Chad hit a 3, and then I think we had a big maybe an alley-oop dunk. I think that was right after that was when they had the breakaway steal and Tahad alley-oop dunk. Like, he sets off those chain reactions. It's kind of a similar thing. Anything else to say there before we pivot? I got a scenario I want to throw out at you.
Scenario us.
Scenario. Okay, here's it's not really a scenario, it's more of a question. Okay. If Auburn does insert whatever you want to insert, they cannot be beat.
Pause.
What is the one thing?
Pause.
What is the Yeah. What do you mean?
Say that again.
Okay. If Auburn does, and then you insert this thing, okay? A certain thing. Okay.
What thing?
This is what you're going to tell me. This is the question.
Okay.
If Auburn does XYZ, they're just really hard to beat. What is the one thing that Auburn does? If Auburn does well, it just makes it to where It completely changes the game to where they just can't be beat.
Wow, that's a great question because they
Scores
do
more points. No, I'm just kidding.
They do multiple things this time. They're so non-one dimensional that they do multiple things. So to pick one, but if I had to pick one, I would say hold you under 60 points by guarding the way they're capable of guarding. If they do that, you ain't got no chance. Period.
Sure. Zach, you got anything? I got a little bit of a different one, but
I'd say when the offense runs through Janai Broome, I think over the last few weeks we've seen them try to do more outside stuff. Tennessee, I think, was an example, which makes sense. Janai Broome wasn't fully healthy, and then you've got games like this past where they're like 50% from three or something absurd. But I think when you see the offense go through Janai and they try to go more inside with Janai, I think everything else kind of falls around it. So when Auburn runs the offense efficiently through Janai Broome, they'll beat anybody.
I got a little bit of a different one, and it's based off of looking at when Auburn's been hot, the little bitty shooting cold streak that Auburn's gone through, and then you look at this game this past Saturday. When Denver Jones is shooting threes, when Denver Jones is hot, you better just take your team to the locker room, get them a hamburger, get on the bus, and go home because there's no chance. You have no chance. To me, when Denver's hot, when he was going on that streak where he was shooting like 70% from three, Auburn was beating the eyes out of people, okay? Just absolutely drumming people, and he went, what was it, 4 of 7 from three against Ole Miss. And when that happens, when Denver Jones is hot, and when his shot's popping and when it's falling, to me, Auburn cannot be beat, especially when you throw into the fact that he plays just unreal defense on top of it. When you can combine those two things in a game, I just don't see how you can beat this team.
Do you think it's Denver specifically, or do you think it's just when somebody is shooting red hot? Because I feel that way when Tahad's on. I felt that way against Ole Miss when like Chad couldn't miss from three down the stretch, and Miles. I guess it's been a minute since Miles kind of got red hot. I know he had some big plays against Tennessee, but I think it'd be like that if anybody went through that stretch that Denver had. I don't think it's specific to Denver. Do you?
To me, go ahead.
I do, and I think it's because he is one of the most. Outside of Broome, he's the most important player on that basketball team. And people can talk about Chad Baker-Mazara. I love him, and you know how I love Miles Kelly. But he is asked to play, in my opinion, one of the most important positions on the floor. And he's almost playing out of position because they had him at the 2 guard when he got recruited. He's playing point guard, low turnover to assist ratio. He's locking down the other team's best guard, and he's hitting three. To me, it is a Denver thing. I agree with Kyle. He's the engine. You can talk about Broome, and I get it. Broome is the National Player of the Year. But when you go back and look at the games that Denver has played really, really well and a lot of points, it seems like coincidentally Auburn blows people out.
That's kind of the point out. When Auburn was going through the little streak to where we're talking like, oh, can they finish? Are they able to close teams out? They're letting these teams back into it. If you look at it, Denver went on a really cold shooting streak for about 4 or 5 games. And that's about the time where we were talking about, what's the difference in this team right now than before, even though we were still winning. And then he goes out and goes 4-7. He hit 3 of 3. He was 3 of 3 in the first half, like just lights out. And then Auburn basically never really relinquishes the lead, and it wasn't really close. Got a super chat. Luka Thomas, Hod's lob from Denver isn't getting enough love. He does things that size of a guy just shouldn't be able to do. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, he's special. You have a hard time like just defining like it factor and like what makes people special. Like whatever it is, he's got it.
Whenever they did have that fast break, I saw it, like you could see it materializing from about half court, but I just still didn't think we're not lobbing one to they're not going to lob it to Hod. And
Right.
sure enough,
They did it.
Sure enough, they did, and he goes in and absolutely slams it. So he's special. I know that he and Denver play obviously the same position, so that obviously makes it kind of a little bit tougher at times to get minutes. But he did play 24 minutes, and he didn't have his most electric scoring night from a total points perspective, but still, he's going to do some stuff that just wows you. He did hit a big three early in the game, or not early in the second half, I believe, that I remember that kind of sparked a little run. So he's definitely electric. So Auburn has 2 home games. It feels like, and it doesn't feel like it. We have of our first 9 games, I think 5 of them, 4 or maybe 6 were on the road. So you played a lot. I feel like a lot of games.
Surely Auburn's lost a few games then, since they've started with so many games on the road.
I know, surely, right? Let's check the stats. That'd be a negative. That'd be a negative. No, they were
haven't
undefeated.
lost a game in conference play.
5 of their first 8 SEC games were on the road, and they have yet to lose. I mean, that you talk about banking wins, which is going to pay off for you down the road when hopefully you start to, on the back end, start to stack home games. It's huge. It's huge.
You still have 4 really tough road games, but let's talk about this week. You got to go 2-0 every week. 2-0 every week will get you where you got to be. You have Oklahoma at home on, it looks like, is that Tuesday at 8 o'clock? Oklahoma at home, and then you have Florida, who is just coming off getting their eyes beat out by Tennessee. What are your thoughts on this week? I mean, it feels like Oklahoma should be able to handle them. Florida could be a tough game. Overall thoughts on this week?
I think the best thing that could have happened to Auburn was Oklahoma blowing out Vanderbilt, because it was asked of me by Lindsey Crosby, does Auburn look past Oklahoma and at the Florida game? And I said, no, not in this conference. Well, that was before we got off the air and Oklahoma absolutely took Vanderbilt's manhood. So that's a huge, huge thing. I think that's the best thing that could have happened to Auburn is Bruce Pearl roll that tape and say, look what this team's capable of doing.
Yeah.
You better get their attention. And so you take that one, you get that one behind you, and then you play Florida probably less than strength, with not fully strength, with Clayton probably not playing. So I like Auburn's chance in both.
Yeah, I think Auburn goes 2-0. I don't think Oklahoma's good, but I agree. I think I think that's a great point. I think it's a great point. And then Florida, like every time I watch Florida, they don't like to play defense. And I think Auburn's going to be able to. I think Auburn scores 90 on Florida. I really do.
At home, for sure. I'm with you. I think
now Florida may score 88, but
sure.
But whatever the over under is, take the over on that game.
A good 2-game homestand, I feel like is pretty much needed right now. Janai did come back off of an injury, and you can tell at times he's lingering a little bit.
He's fine.
But I know he's fine. But still, you get to come home and you don't have to travel, obviously, so you don't lose that whole day of getting up, moving around, having to go. You're at home, it's comfortable, and I think it's coming at a really good time. Auburn plays, like you said, Oklahoma should be favored by, I would imagine, double digits in that game. I'd be curious to see what that spread looks like against Florida, who has to actually play that tricky little Vanderbilt team in the middle of the week this week. So,
I like that, actually.
Yeah, you won't know, obviously, until they determine whether Clayton's playing or not. That's going to affect that. I will also say I would love the best thing that could happen Tuesday night, and I'm not saying this will happen but Auburn needs to have a game like they had 3 weeks ago where it's like not in doubt with about 4 or 5 minutes left to go in the game, and you can start rested. Broom doesn't have to get 33 minutes. He gets 26 or 27. That kind of thing. Those add up. People don't think that 5 or 6 minutes a game matter, but they do. You start stacking weeks. So I'd love to see a scenario where Auburn could start pulling some guys with 4 or 5 minutes left to go in the game and get them some blows.
And I want to correct myself here. Luca is calling me out in the chat, and he is right. Florida statistically is good on defense. It seems like every time I watch them, the other team scores a bunch of points. So
especially Kentucky. I mean, they Kentucky
from I haven't watched every Florida game, but the big games that I've watched, like it seems like, I don't know, it seems like they they give up a lot of points, but statistically that is untrue. So
Well, Tennessee
wanna be
scored
correct on that.
64 on them, which is like 100 from like someone like a
Yeah.
regular team.
Yes, that
That's
is.
right.
It's like dog years. So
That's right.
That's fantastic. All right, so Auburn is sorry. Auburn is what are we 8 or 9-0 in conference? 8-0 in conference.
8-0,
Okay.
yeah.
So what after you've seen these first 8 games, what are you predicting the final record to be?
I'll let you
Anything-
go first, Zach.
I think we lose 2.
16-2. That would be what Ken Palm, I believe, the analytics predicted. So that'd be pretty strong. That
15-3.
I still feel like that 15.
Who are the 3 if you had to guess that?
Alabama, Kentucky, and A&M.
I could see that.
All road games.
All road games. You play
That Vanderbilt one's going to be tricky because
in that
Auburn's
godforsaken arena.
Yeah, that gym, and I wouldn't even call it an arena. It's a gym or a bandbox. I mean, I'm surprised
Zepp calls it an auditorium.
They do plays at halftime.
It's the
high school
Shakespeare Festival.
plays. It's a stage.
It's the Shakespeare Festival.
It's
during
the
the
only
week.
place. It's the only place on game time where you buy one ticket and you see a play at halftime and a college basketball game.
I love
But
it.
That's right.
I think that the 4 teams I just mentioned, those 4 road games, I don't think Auburn's going to lose all 4, but I think they lose 3 of those 4, go 15-3, and still win the conference comfortably.
15-3 gets it done. Now I'm thinking I'm leaning towards 16-2. I think you split those. I think you split those win all your home games, split those away games, and go 16-2 to the house, and you're the number 1 overall seed going to the tournament. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I don't know exactly which games you play, but I think if you're the number 1 overall seed, you're going to get a substantial amount of big time games in Atlanta. So that would be another big bonus for finishing out strong. So guys, I really appreciate y'all jumping in. A lot of fun as always. Thanks for the comments, all the stuff in the comment section. A lot of fun interaction. We're going to do it every single week. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, or all of us, or a combination. So we're going to have some fun and keep it rolling. So any parting thoughts before we head out?
I want to say, when you talk about the number 1 overall seed, for years I've complained about how the SEC tournament doesn't seem to have an impact on seeding in the NCAA tournament, the SEC. This will be a year that I'm okay with that. Because remember, Auburn slipped up against A&M a couple years ago when they were rolling. Yeah. Auburn will be a number 1 seed regardless of what happens in an SEC tournament scenario. And this is the first year I'm actually glad that it doesn't have an impact.
That's a good point. Me too. Finish off at 16-2, and then just whatever happens in the SEC tournament happens.
Yeah,
win the regular season, and whatever happens. I don't even care. A lot of fun, guys. Got a super fun season. A lot of basketball left, and we'll be back here talking about it every single week. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. Stay button.
Thanks for listening, and drive home safely.